Good morning to you. I'm Danilo Evangelista, and welcome to our weekly tropical weather outlook for today, Saturday, April 19th, 2025. Let's start off, as we usually do today, with a countdown till hurricane season, which begins on June 1st. As of today, April 19th, we are now 43 days away from the hurricane season, 3 days till the 40-day mark, and with that, we're only now I think about 6 weeks, if we were to translate that to weeks. I think, yeah, we're about 6 weeks out from hurricane season. Definitely a sign that things are fast approaching. And we're now more than halfway through the month of April. Before you know it, we're going to be in May. And before you know it, with that, May will pass by really quickly, and we'll be in June. But since we are very close to May, I thought we'd also take a look at the countdown till the Eastern Pacific hurricane season, which begins about 2 weeks earlier than the Atlantic. It begins on May 15th. We're only 26 days away from that, so we're less than a month away from the Eastern Pacific hurricane season. And that's kind of just I guess a benchmark you would kind of say to um, you know, n- to kind of pinpoint how close we are to hurricane season is, a measure of when the Eastern Pacific season starts. Bottom line is it is only a matter of time. We're just weeks away now from the beginning of when we'll start taking a look at the tropics more seriously, whether that be the Eastern Pacific or the Atlantic hurricane season. And it's just a measure to kind of, you know, point out to you guys that hurricane season is definitely very much fast approaching, and we're almost at it. It's pretty much knocking on our doorstep now. We're just weeks away from it. Let's now move on to the current sea surface temperature plots across the Western Hemisphere, in the Atlantic and the Pacific. And this is the map updated as of April 17th. I think the map for yesterday has not been out yet. It was, as you know, that this map always updates a day behind. But I mean, it's only 2 days that, we're from. So I don't think there's really, or 2 days that, this map is from 2 days behind, April 17th. Don't think there's that much of a difference. So, not much to worry about it. So let's see what's going on with the sea surface temperature anomalies right now. At least in the Pacific, you could see kind of neutral. We had, especially if you remember last month, lots of warmth, especially in the Eastern Pacific. That has definitely gone away since then. We're now starting to see some cooler anomalies begin to show up in the equatorial Eastern Pacific. And as you head out towards the Central Pacific, really not much in the way in terms of any overwhelming cold or overwhelming warmth. So I guess you could kind of say that we're in an ENSO neutral right now, which has pretty much been the case for the last several weeks. And it looks like that is probably what the case will be going forward for the next several weeks. Models, if you remember, obviously, earlier this year, lots of talk about whether or not we'll get an El Nino, and it could still happen. I mentioned last week, El Nino could potentially still happen, but at least if you're looking at the chances, especially given the ENSO state right now, especially that we're in mid-April, and you want to talk about whether or not we'll have an El Nino that'll develop and potentially be a significant impact to this hurricane season. I don't think so, especially with the look that we have right now. Not much in the way in terms of overwhelming cold or overwhelming warm. So we're not necessarily in a La Nina or an El Nino. We're ENSO neutral, which is also not unfavorable for the Atlantic. Really, it's as long as we don't have an El Nino, especially an overwhelmingly strong El Nino, that generally sets us up in a pretty favorable position in the Atlantic. There are tons of years where we had ENSO neutrals in the Pacific, and we had a very active hurricane season in the Atlantic. In fact, some of those years are pretty notable years, pretty, hallmark seasons that we think of in the Atlantic as well. Meanwhile, though, in terms of Atlantic sea surface temperature anomalies, generally warm, slightly above normal. Definitely, if you were to compare this to where we were this time last year, we're nowhere near that. We've seen quite a bit of cooling in the Atlantic, especially compared to last year. And you can see that as well with anomalies off the west coast of Africa. You're starting to see some of these, blues and colder anomalies kind of make their way in. Although I'm not really worried about this. This is only April. We have a few weeks left till hurricane season, and I'm pretty sure within those few weeks we'll probably see quite a bit of warming occur in the eastern tropical Atlantic. But I think I mentioned this last week, but either way, these colder anomalies that we kind of have here now, maybe the Atlantic, the eastern Atlantic, is not necessarily extremely warm right now, especially if you were to compare that to last year. But it doesn't really matter because early on in the season, anyways, we're not looking for development out here in the Eastern Atlantic. We typically look towards closer to home in the Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, and maybe off the East Coast for potential development early on in the season. It's not really till late July or August that we start paying attention to development in the Eastern Atlantic when we start getting tropical waves off of Africa to develop in the main development region. And I'm pretty sure by the time we get to July and August, this area will definitely be a lot warmer and much more prime for development. And really, once again, going back to the Pacific, taking a look at the SOI dashboard, still remains positive. The latest average for today for the 30-day at 7 points, and the 90-day average is at 8 points. So generally a strong SOI, positive SOI remains, and that generally means atmospherically we are much more in line with the La Nina than we are within El Nino. So kind of once again proving a little bit more that we're really not in a position to head towards an El Nino of really any kind right now. Once again, that does not mean that we will not have an El Nino later on in the year, but at least as of right now, especially that we're in April, we're not seeing overwhelming signs of heading towards an El Nino, and I'll show you that too with the current graph of the Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomalies. The latest value, at least as of April 17th, because this is the Coral Reef Watch sea surface temperature anomaly. So pretty much this exact map, but just taking a segment of the Nino 3.4 region in the Eastern Pacific and kind of graphing it out in terms of the exact, average value. The latest is negative zero point 0.1 degrees Celsius. So leaning cool neutral, but once again, not in a, overwhelmingly strong La Nina, or on the flip side, an overwhelmingly strong El Nino. So we're in ENSO neutral now, and it's kind of been persistent that way for the last several weeks. And we're not seeing, a dramatic warming like we saw maybe a few weeks ago in early March. We're not seeing that kind of warming occur now. And once again, I'll continue to say this: if we're not seeing signs of an El Nino transitioning happening now, that we're in April, doesn't matter if an El Nino happens later or not, we're probably not going to have an El Nino develop in time to significantly impact the hurricane season. So in terms of the Atlantic hurricane season being active this year from the standpoint of ENSO, I'd say that we're in at least a somewhat favorable standpoint in terms of ENSO to favor an active hurricane season this year. And as a result, let's take a look at the forecast so far, because now we're in, April, and, we've had quite a bit of forecasts that have come out so far for this hurricane season. And kind of just going down the list, we've obviously had, several weeks ago, we had Colorado State University release their forecasts at the beginning of this month, and they came out with an active hurricane season. And then we've had a few more forecasts since then. TSR, University of Arizona, they went near normal. We also had a few other forecasts as well. I think this is University of Missouri. They came out near to slightly above normal hurricane season. We also had North Carolina State University come out this past week. They also have a, I guess, slightly below normal to near normal, maybe slightly above average. And then the Weather Channel came out on Thursday, and they have a pretty decently above normal hurricane season. So everybody kind of agreeing right now, at least with the current forecasts that have been released over the last several weeks, that we're generally going to be, or at least the general expectation for this season is near to maybe slightly above normal season. And that makes sense given that We don't really have an El Nino, not even a La Nina right now. We're kind of in ENSO neutral. And the Atlantic is, going back to the sea surface temperature anomaly map, the Atlantic is somewhat above normal. Maybe not the warmest we've ever seen, but we don't see a bunch of these cold anomalies like we have here off the eastern coast of Africa. They're not widespread across the deep tropics of the Atlantic. So as long as we don't have that, I'd assume we're in a pretty good shape to at least have a somewhat above normal hurricane season. And as you can see by majority of the forecasts so far, they're generally somewhere within that range. So that's at least the standpoint of what hurricane season is looking like right now. Obviously, we're in mid-April. Lots to change when it comes to the setup for hurricane season. We might have an El Nino develop maybe within the next few weeks, rapidly, and we're not seeing that yet. But at least as of right now, we're not rapidly rushing towards an El Nino. And the Atlantic is generally warm. And right now, the expectations because of that is that the hurricane season could generally end up nearly to slightly above normal. Things could change though. We're still several weeks away from the hurricane season. But looks like we're maybe starting to get some agreement as of right now. That's just how things stand. Really quickly though, before I end, a look at current weather across the United States right now. Not much happening, although we are expecting some severe weather today. There is generally a weather system across the central United States. We're going to have some severe weather, and we also have the risk for flooding. As you can see, quite a bit of flood watches in effect from Texas through the central United States, encompassing portions of Oklahoma, Arkansas, some of Missouri, and into southwestern or kind of central southwestern Illinois. And as obvious, I mentioned severe weather is important, but also so is whenever we get potential flooding as well. And I always mention with this tropical cyclones, the number one killer is the flooding rain. So quite a bit of nuisance weather that we have for today. And you can see that as well with the severe weather outlook. Obviously, there is severe weather expected today. We have an enhanced risk for portions of central Texas. We have a slight risk from that extends all the way from the southern border up into the central eastern Midwest. And then we have a marginal risk from there that extends all the way into the Northeast, if you can believe it. Very warm weekend this weekend. In fact, here in New York City, I'll tell you, we're expected to reach into the 80s today. So I guess it makes sense that we have a marginal risk for severe weather that extends all the way into the Northeast. And then as we head into tomorrow, severe weather continues, especially across portions of the central United States, and enhanced risk for portions of Arkansas and Missouri. Obviously, there is the tornado, wind, and hail risk for that. Then as we move into day 3, severe weather then goes away. And then let's take a look at the day 4 to 8 range heading into next week. Severe weather generally remains quiet, so not much in the way of severe weather as we head into next week. But for this weekend, some severe weather possible across central portions of the United States. Not atypical given that we're in April and we're pretty much into the height of severe weather season now. So obviously, if you are in any severe weather highlighted area today, make sure to keep a watch to the skies, or if you know anybody that might potentially get severe weather today, tell them to keep in mind of the weather as we head into today and tomorrow, especially across the central portions of the United States. And obviously, as I always mention, we have severe weather now. We're now getting into the thick of severe weather season as we're now heading into mid to late April and into May. And once we get past that, we're pretty much going to be in late May heading into June, and hurricane season will pretty much be on our doorstep and just beginning. So quite an active time period we have coming up when it comes to weather. And once again, we are very close to hurricane season. Before you know it, it'll begin. With that being said, though, not much else going on today. So we're going to leave it off here. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed what you saw today, would really, really appreciate it if you like, comment, and especially subscribe to my channel, and turn on the notification bell for whenever I post, you can get the video the second I upload it. Once again, thanks for watching today. Stay safe, enjoy the rest of your weekend. Peace, love, and kindness to you all, and we will talk again next week.